Deepchand couldn't sleep, but that was nothing new. Nobody in Rudraprayag slept well anymore, not since the poof had started coming. That's what they called it, not a leopard, a but, a spirit. Because a leopard, however hungry, does not break down a barred door like it's made of paper. It does not claw through a mud wall as if it knows exactly where the wall is thinnest. It does not pass a locked house and a bolted house and a house with 3 dogs chained outside and choose every single time the one house where the door was left unbarred by a single inch. A poof does that. A poof knows things a leopard has no business knowing. Deepchand lay still beside the low embers of the hearth, listening to his household breathe. His brother-in-law slept an arm's length away, sharing the same hookah pipe they had passed back and forth before turning in, now cooling on the floor between them. No lamp, no candle, nothing that might catch the poof's eye and mark this house as occupied, as breathing, as full of something warm. He heard nothing. That was the thing about the poof. You never heard it coming. You only sometimes heard it leaving. His brother-in-law reached down toward the floor to retrieve the pipe. It took him perhaps 2 seconds. In the hill villages of Garhwal, they would later tell it as though it took none at all, as if a man could look away and look back and find the world rearranged in the space of a single blink. When he looked up, Deepchand was gone. Not thrown, not dragged screaming the way you'd expect. Gone the way a candle goes out. No cry, no struggle. Nothing beyond, perhaps, the faintest displacement of air near the doorway, gone before the mind could even flag it as wrong. His brother-in-law sat there in the dark a long moment before his mind allowed itself to understand what his eyes were telling him, that the space where a living man had been lying was now simply empty. By the time anyone dared search, the sun had done most of the work of restoring their courage, and they found what they always found, an absence of drag marks, because whatever had taken Deepchand had carried him with such control that his body barely touched the ground at all. A trail that simply stopped being findable, the way tracks do when something can move between shadow and shadow without a sound. This was not the first house the poof had visited. By 1925, it had been doing this for 7 years. It would do it for 1 more. I'm gonna tell you about the Leopard of Rudraprayag, a name given eventually by a man who insisted calmly and repeatedly that it wasn't a demon at all, just an old, wounded, extraordinarily patient animal. The villagers never quite believed him. By the end, I'm not sure he fully believed himself either. Here's the strange thing about demons. They usually have an origin story far less interesting than the legend that grows around them. This one starts with an epidemic. In 1918, the same global influenza pandemic that killed tens of millions worldwide tore through the hill villages of Garhwal. The dead came faster than the living could attend to them. Cremations along the Alaknanda River were rushed, sometimes abandoned halfway because there wasn't enough wood or enough strength left in grieving hands to finish the job. A leopard doesn't know the difference between a body meant to be there and one that wasn't. It only knows that meat, easily gotten, has suddenly appeared along a riverbank it already knew well. Somewhere in that terrible year, one leopard learned a lesson that changed everything after, that the two-legged animals in these villages were not only edible, but far easier to get to than any deer or boar. The first confirmed kill came on the 9th of June, 1918, in the village of Benji. It would be the first of at least 125. Jim Corbett, the man eventually sent to end this, later admitted even that number felt conservative. Records in these remote villages were patchy, and he suspected more people had vanished into the dark than anyone had ever reported. For 8 years, this leopard treated the pilgrim road between the shrines of Kedarnath and Badrinath as its personal hunting ground, a road walked by thousands of devout travelers every season, and for the length of one animal's life, one of the most dangerous stretches of earth in India. You have to understand what 8 years of this does to a place. As soon as the light began to go, doors were barred with whatever timber a family could spare. Livestock were walled in. Lamps were snuffed, because even the faintest glow might mark a house as occupied. And then the villagers went silent. Not quiet, silent, the specific and total silence of people who have learned, through repeated and unbearable proof, that any sound might be the one that decides who doesn't wake up tomorrow. Still, it wasn't enough. Barred doors weren't the obstacle anyone assumed. This leopard broke doors down outright, clawed through mud and wattle walls, and forced its way through window openings barely wide enough for its own shoulders, locating, with what felt to the villagers like deliberate intelligence, the single weakest point in a structure every single time. Stone might stop it, iron-reinforced timber might slow it, thatch and packed mud were nothing, so of course they called it a booth. In at least one recorded instance, that terror curdled into something uglier. A local holy man was seized by a mob convinced he was the were-leopard in human form, and it took the direct intervention of the district's deputy commissioner to stop them from lynching an innocent man over a crime committed by an animal. The British government tried nearly everything a colonial administration of that era knew how to try. They sent respected, experienced hunters, and the leopard evaded everyone. They posted a reward that swelled to 20,000 rupees, an almost unthinkable sum, and still nothing. They brought in a company of Gurkha soldiers, professional trackers and marksmen by trade. Nothing. Steel gin traps, poison, not a scratch. By late 1925, with the death toll climbing and even the British Parliament taking notice, the government turned to a man named Jim Corbett, a name that already carried weight in these hills. Corbett wasn't a hunter in the romantic safari jacket sense. He'd grown up in this country, worked the railways and the timber trade, spoke the local languages fluently, and had already in 1907 tracked down and killed the Champawat tiger, an animal blamed for over 400 deaths, possibly the deadliest single man-eating animal ever recorded. For that kill, the governor of the United Provinces had personally gifted him a rifle, a .275 Rigby. That same rifle would go with him now, into a hunt that would prove by his own admission the hardest of his career. A tiger, for all its danger, is at least an honest adversary, large and prone to announcing itself, whether through a territorial roar or simple carelessness born of fearing nothing. A leopard is different, smaller, quieter, and after 7 years of dodging every trap and bullet aimed at it, this leopard had effectively been trained by its enemies. Every failed ambush wasn't neutral, it was a lesson. By the time Corbett arrived, the Booth of Rudraprayag had a graduate education in exactly what humans do to try to kill it, and exactly how to not be there when they do. What followed was not one dramatic night, but a campaign stretching across 10 weeks. Corbett, working alongside William Ibbotson, the Deputy Commissioner of Garwal, tried village after village, tactic after tactic, goats staked as bait, long vigils over kills, motionless nights on likely trails. Early on, sitting up over a goat carcass, hours into total silence, Corbett heard a low grunt from the undergrowth, precisely the sound a leopard makes easing up to feed. His hand found a rifle without conscious instruction. The grunt came again, closer, or so his ears insisted, though at night distance is a lie told with total confidence and no evidence behind it. He raised the rifle by degrees, and then, directly below him, a porcupine waddled into the moonlight and began gnawing contentedly at the carcass he'd been guarding for 3 hours. He noted the moment afterward with something close to embarrassment that decades in these jungles hadn't stopped his nerves from being conscripted without his permission by an animal that posed him no danger at all. That was the texture of most of the hunt, long stretches of nothing, punctuated by false alarms, while the leopard, again and again, simply wasn't where the evidence said it should be, or was somewhere else entirely, in the village Corbett had left days before, adding a name to the tally while he sat alert and freezing in a valley the animal had already decided to avoid. One morning stayed with him longer than the rest. He'd spent a full night at a trap site, seen nothing, and at dawn walked the familiar route back to his rest house. He thought nothing of it, he'd walked that path 100 times. The next morning, out of habit, he examined the ground near his own door and found his own boot prints from the walk home laid out clearly in the mud. Pressed into the center of every single one, the entire way from the trap site to his own front step, was a leopard's paw print, not beside his trail. Inside it, placed with a precision that meant the animal had walked directly in his footsteps, close enough behind him the whole way that it could have closed the distance in under 2 seconds, at any point, had it chosen to. It hadn't chosen to. That was the part that stayed with him, not that it had followed him. Leopards are curious, opportunistic animals. What unsettled him was the restraint. An animal that could have taken him at any point on that walk had instead simply watched and filed it away, the way it had apparently filed away every trap and bullet aimed at it for 7 straight years. For just a moment, standing over his own footprints in daylight, even Jim Corbett understood exactly what the villagers meant when they said poof. By the 1st of May 1926, Corbett had spent 10 nights in mushans along the Pilgrim Road, tethered goats bleating uselessly beneath him while the leopard, again and again, declined to appear. He had every reason to believe the 11th night would go the same way. Then, that morning, word arrived that changed everything. A woman had gone down to fetch water near the village of Golabrai and never come back. Corbett and Ibbotson rode out, guided by villagers, following pug marks along the Pilgrim Road until they found her body in a wooded ravine, tracks confirming, beyond doubt, this was the leopard they'd spent 10 weeks failing to kill. It was, in its own terrible way, an opportunity. A fresh kill meant a predator likely to return to it. By that evening, Corbett had a machan built in a mango tree roughly 60 yards from the body, a bell goat tethered on the road below as a second option. Then there was nothing to do but climb up and wait. The night came on clear and cold, stars hard overhead, the ridgeline black against a sky that seemed, if anything, too bright. Plenty of light to see by, and plenty for something else to see him by too. Hours passed. The goat shifted and rang its bell for no reason at all, the kind of false alarm Corbett had learned to let wash past him. Then, well past midnight, he heard something move on the road. Not the goat, something with far more weight behind each footfall and far more control over where that weight landed. He didn't move. The sound stopped, started again, stopped. It was circling, he was almost certain, though certainty in the dark, listening to an animal you cannot see, is its own kind of unreliable comfort. Then, with no further warning, the leopard came for the kill site below him. Corbett fired. In the dark, at a shape rather than a target, there's no knowing in the instant whether a shot has landed true. What followed was a violent thrash of sound, then something heavy dragging itself off the road into the ravine's thick cover, snapping branches as it went, and then nothing. The same total silence that had swallowed 125 people over 8 years. He did not climb down. A wounded leopard in dense cover, in the dark, was in some ways more dangerous than an unwounded one, cornered, in pain, with nothing left to lose by charging the first thing that moved. So he sat through the rest of the night, rifle across his knees, with no idea whether he'd ended 8 years of terror or merely wounded something that would now be twice as unpredictable. He waited for first light. When the sky finally grayed in the east, he climbed down, rifle ready, and picked up the blood trail. It led only a short way to a stretch of ground among the tree roots where the leopard of Rudraprayag lay dead. It was the 2nd of May, 1926, nearly 8 years, almost to the week, since Deep Chand had vanished from beside a cooling hookah pipe in the dark. The animal measured 7.5 feet, nose to tail. An old male, powerful still, its gums badly receded, and beneath the hide the healed scars of several earlier gunshot wounds, proof that other hunters before Corbett had gotten shots off and simply hadn't been enough. It hadn't needed to be invincible, it had only needed to survive every mistake made against it, which in practice amounts to nearly the same thing. The town of Rudraprayag still remembers. A signboard marks the spot where the leopard fell, and for decades a fair was held there each year. In the memory of those who lived through those 8 years, Corbett wasn't just a hunter who'd gotten lucky where 100 others had failed. He was something closer to a sadhu, a holy man, sent to finally do what an army of soldiers, steel traps, and poison bait could not. What strikes me isn't the death toll, staggering as it is. It's how badly a very ordinary explanation, an animal, probably no more than 70 or 80 pounds, that learned during a public health disaster that human beings were both available and undefended, got mistaken night after night for something out of this world entirely. When something moves that quietly, waits that patiently, and finds the one unlatched door on the one night it matters, calling it a demon might just be the more comfortable story to tell yourself before you blow out the lamp. Corbett went on to hunt several more man-eaters and eventually became one of the earliest and most committed voices for tiger and leopard conservation in India, a legacy that today carries his name at Jim Corbett National Park. A strange second act for a man once mistaken for a demon slayer, but then again, nobody understood better than he did just how rare an animal like this really was, and just how badly, in almost every other case, our fear of the dark points in exactly the wrong direction. That's the story of 8 years, 125 names we mostly don't know, and a hunter who proved that even the patient dark eventually runs out of nights. If you like this one, like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and thanks as always for listening.